So let's get to work on the To-Do app. Now, before we start, I should mention a lot of this content, a lot of the stuff we're going to write is very similar to what we did before with the color box maker. And that's really because it's a pattern that we follow a lot of the time. We need to make a form. Well, that form often is going to have a handle change method. It's going to have an onSubmit that triggers something in the parent and passes data up to the parent. The parent does something with it in the state, causing a re-render. So this is a pattern that we see in a lot of applications, not just color boxes and to-dos, but there is some stuff that's going to be substantially different, like the editing, as we've discussed. Toggling a form on and off, we're going to have to keep track of whether the form is showing or not, whether the to-do is being edited or not. And we haven't seen how to actually update something yet. It's not super difficult, but that stuff will be new. So I'm going to put that in its own video, just in case you want to skip ahead to that. If you feel confident about creating a form, adding something into the state, removing something based off of an ID, a lot of this will be very similar. And then as far as styling, I'm going to wait until the end to start worrying about styling. I don't want to slow down the React specific stuff with styling, making CSS. It just gets in the way, but I will have it at the end. Okay, so I have my new app. I called it To-Do app, very creative. And I'm going to delete everything from in here. And I'm going to come over to make a new file. Let's start with the to-do list component this time. In the last video, or the last solution for the box making thing, we started with the box component, simply to display one box. I'm going to go the other direction, just for some variety. So begin with a to-do list. And the first thing we know about our to-do list, we're going to need a constructor because we're going to need some state. So this.state equals, and all we really need to keep is a list of to-dos. And we'll be adding into that list as we go. Next, let's address our render. So I'll add an H1 that says to-do list. And then we know we're going to have a form in here somewhere. And then below that, we're going to have a unordered list containing a bunch of to-dos. So right now we don't have any to-dos to render, but they'll go here eventually. They'll be probably LIs, looking like, to-do 1 and to-do 2, that sort of thing. So let's just get this rendering. I always like to start with that. So import to-do list from, there we go, imported it, and we're rendering a single to-do list, and we're seeing it show up here. Now the styles are kind of annoying. That's coming from the default React or create React app styles. If we remove that class, this isn't much better, to be honest, but at least the to-dos aren't massive. Okay, so now that we have that done, we know that we're going to need to have a way of creating a new to-do. We need a way of removing a to-do. But now let's work on just displaying a single to-do. So all that to-do really has, at least for now, until we worry about editing and updating and deleting things, really all that we care about is the task name itself, like walk the dog, feed the fish, that sort of thing. So let's make our to-do component, todo.js, and let's start by just returning a div with an li inside of it that has this.props.task. Now we have to decide on a name, so I'm going with task, even though we're not using that anywhere else. We're going to have to abide by that name and pass down a task as props. So let's also add in our two buttons. Even though they're not going to work, we'll have an edit button and then another one that's just an X to delete the task or the to-do. Okay, so this is all we need for now. Now in our to-do list, what I like to do is start with some sample data. So we'll have task, walk the fish, and then we'll have a second one which has a task of groom chickens. Okay, so we have our list of to-dos, just two starter ones. We need to add IDs in, but we'll get to that. Now inside of here, instead of rendering LIs, we're going to import our to-do component. Hopefully this is pretty standard at this point. Oh, I need to say from. There we go. And then instead of doing my map inline right here, I always like to make a variable for my to-dos or whatever the data set is. This.state.todos.map. So this is also pretty standard. We've seen this many times. And we're going to return a to-do. And our to-do right now is just going to have a task prop set to to-do.task. And then instead of our UL, we'll simply render to-dos. So we're making this array of to-dos that we're mapping and then rendering it down here. Let's see if we're seeing anything. Okay, so again, our styles aren't great, but we have two buttons. They don't do anything, and we're getting the task. Now we do have this issue of the key, which we'll address in just a moment, but we'll wait until we work on the form in the next video.